Elevated Grapes Podcast.
Elevated Grapes Podcast.
With your host, Sethi.
Your host, Sethi.
And Stylist, Rashi Bindra.
It's time to get started.
Let's talk fashion, shall we?
Welcome everybody to the Elevated Grapes Podcast. I am your host, Sethi.
And this is your stylist, Rashi Bindra.
And we're going to do something a little bit different for this one. We're actually not going to be talking about a fashion show or industry trends or anything. We're actually going to have a live strategy session for Elevated Grapes.
Okay.
Well, because, we try to sit down and do this. It's just our schedules are so hectic.
No. Our schedules are not that hectic.
They're quite hectic.
No. This guy is too much of a superstar for me because he's, hosting everywhere. He's DJing everywhere. And it's like, hey, dude, do you want to, hang out and, work on our stuff? Rashi, I can't. I have all this stuff to do. I have so many things to do. I cannot come and spend time with you and work on our stuff. So, okay, Sadr, do you want to do it via a phone call? Sure. Hey, do you want to talk today? Well, I have this and I have that and I have that to finish and I have that to finish and I'm going to unwind right now. So no, I can't. Yeah, there you go.
So like I said, the schedules are busy. So therefore, we're like, you know what? Why not just do this live? Why not just do it as an actual podcast? And that way, for our listeners also, you get to see a lot of what goes on behind the scenes. I don't want to use that word because it's so cliche, but what goes on behind the scenes.
How's this behind the scenes if we're creating this into a podcast?
Because we're actually talking about stuff that we wouldn't talk about in a podcast. We're talking about things that you and I have to plan to put our different elements of Elevated Grapes together. And that's not done for everybody to hear. So it's going to be raw. It's going to be, I'm not going to edit out anything. Whatever comes out, the way it comes out is what's going to happen.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. So we're going to get right into it. There's a notepad. We're going to just talk notes. We have an agenda from what we have to discuss in terms of different Elevated Grapes projects for both this year, next year, people we're trying to work with, things we're trying to do. And we're going to go through a whole bunch of that over the course of the next roughly half an hour to 45 minutes and lay out our plan for the rest of this year and parts of 2020. So let's get right into it. You ready?
Do you have that beautiful outline that I
do. It's on my phone.
There you go.
So I gotta look it up. Do you remember any of the first topics so we can get started while I look
Yes,
it up?
half of them was his comments where it said we can discuss. Yes, I freaking know that we can discuss because we have to discuss it. Second line, we can discuss. What do you mean we can discuss? We have to discuss. It's two very, very, very different things over there, my friend.
Yeah, which we're going to discuss right now.
Oh dear God, him and his discussions.
As I look this up, you're gonna bring up the first topic. Do you remember any one of the topics? So while I'm looking it up, or do you got to look at it your phone just like I
have to? It's been a while. Okay. Do you have it out, or do I have to?
I'm looking for it right now. We should have probably done this, but see, this is the whole point of doing it live because we're.
Do you know which email address of mine that I sent this to?
I thought it was on a WhatsApp message. I'm looking through WhatsApp right now.
No, it's on our drive.
Oh, right. So we keep everything on a Google Drive, which Rashi does a lot of work to put together, and sometimes I don't pay attention
2020,
to it.
That's what our drive is called, and I have it here.
Okay, I'm going to pull it up as well so we both have it in front of us.
Just go on your drive, type Elevated Grapes 2020.
All right, and
this is what I deal with, ladies and gentlemen.
Search drive.
I will be a bit late for maybe once in the almost year that I've known him and get the look, but he will not have his thing. Elevated Grapes 2020.
And but I typed in 2020, nothing pops up other than that.
Which email address are you?
Elevated Grapes.
Okay, it's not on Elevated Grapes.
So here's the thing, it's an Elevated Grapes plan, but why is it not on Elevated Grapes?
Because there was a reason why that plan was sent from a different email address to you.
Okay, so where do I look for it?
It's sent from Rashi's personal email.
To
either your host or Sadr's email.
Okay. Now we're going to look it up under my other email address.
Okay.
There it is, I found it. You would think that an Elevated Grapes plan would be in the Elevated Grapes drive.
Again, there is a reason why sometimes we do not always do that.
Because it's full.
Sure.
Well, what other reason would it be?
Let's just focus on the...
Yeah, we're trying to figure out why that would, from an organizational standpoint, it would just be easy, right?
Okay, so, the beginning. Go on.
Okay. So, we're going to start, okay, at the beginning, Elevated Grapes, the podcast, a conversation focusing on men's styling, industry trends, and insights, and life as we know it today. So, yeah, one of the comments that I had on this was, originally when we thought about this, it was going to be a podcast that was focused specifically on men's styling.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the premise of it, because the long-term goal for us was to build a men's styling TV show. As we started to do the podcast, some of the guests that we have, some of the topics and the conversations and the direction that they took, were very focused on industry, on lifestyle, on projects, on business. It sort of took its own shape. So what I find, and one of the things that I think is happening, is that we're kind of, I don't know where the identity of it is. Like, and that's what I'm fearing, is that the identity is lost in the way that our branding. Because our branding, there's no specific message. Like, what are we? What is our podcast focus? Like, if we're saying we're men's styling, like, if you look at our Instagram page, or if you look at our Facebook page, or if you look at any one of our event coverage pieces or our podcast, other than a few little bits and pieces on some podcasts, there's nothing to do with men's styling on anything, right? So because I'm just thinking now, I was layman, okay, if I'm a married guy at home with some kids and I'm thinking about styling and they Google, we're not going to pop up anywhere, because we're not relevant to them. Because if we're doing a show that's focusing or that's bringing on a guest like Adrian, for example, or Janice, like our good friends and our partners on certain things, all great shows, but it doesn't cater to that market. So, it's like, what are we trying to achieve, and what's our target market? And if that's shifted, then I think that we have to be mindful of that and make sure our branding is associated with that. Which I think it has shifted, and that's okay. It's not that that's a problem. It's just that I think that we have to realign our branding with it.
Well, and that's a conversation I've been trying to have with you, I think, for a while now, because realistically speaking, yes, again, I know for you, men's styling, a men's TV show, men in fashion has always been what you kind of wanted to do. And that's how I think when you and I started this, that was the direction that we were going to. But again, it also comes down to what the market is out there. I'm not saying there's not a niche for men's styling. I'm not saying there's not a niche for like men's market. But now let's, for example, backtrack a little bit on how men focus on things versus how women focus on things. And the reason why I'm bringing this up in our strategy session is because with men, it's kind of almost like, here's an apple, here's an orange, here's a banana, this is what we have, move on, like, this is it, 1 + 2 + 3, this is the answer, and that's it. With women, you have like a bunch of things happening at the same time. Same thing now with like men's styling. Yes, we've had many topics where we talk about men's styling. We've had some guests like, Cassius. We've had like guests who've talked about men's styling and basics and the trends in general. But I think from a podcast perspective, to hit that men's styling target market only is not serving our purpose, because literally people have reached out to be on the podcast. People want to hear, like want us to, have them tell their story because of the way we tell it. And I think also because you and I are very passionate about fashion, just overall, that kind of plays out in our industry news. So if we were to focus on men's fashion, I think our video style series, that's more men, but I think our podcast has gotten a life of its own, where it's like, okay, we'll talk about trends that's targeted on men. We will have industry guest, which talks about what's happening in the fashion industry in general, and then we have our lifestyle segment that's kind of like stuff that you and I go through, putting all of this stuff together, right? So
fine. So, and again, like I said, I don't think my issue is with it changing direction. Like, that's okay, because as we are growing and recording different segments, whether it's a podcast or an event coverage or whatever the case is, it's going to take a direction of its own. But I think that, like I said earlier, our branding doesn't align with it either. Like, there's no, I'm finding that we're missing an identity. Like, I find that if you look us up and you look at the different things we're doing, as a general layman, if you're looking at it, I don't think there's a clear identity as to what this group is and what they do?
Because we introduced ourselves. If you looked at our description on Instagram, if you looked at our description on YouTube, if you looked at our description on Facebook, you know what I mean, or anywhere where we introduce ourselves, it's almost like this is the journey of you and I building a TV show towards men's styling, right? Technically, at the moment, you and I are honestly like figuring stuff out. The problem is we're figuring stuff out via our YouTube videos, via our podcast.
But the problem, just taking a trial and error approach, I think, is that no one, like, we're not capturing an audience, and so one of the challenges we're facing is growth in our YouTube channel and growth in our
thing, though, right? Like,
Instagram handle, like, and and it's because, if someone comes onto that page or goes onto, like, the idea is it's not clear.
We're not putting our personalities out there. Like,
I don't think that's the case. I still think
no. I think
but the thing is, the reason I'm not going to get the personalities because they don't understand what we're doing. Like, if we're talking about all these different topics and we're talking about all these different things, it's not like, for example, if one topic, and when you touched on it, one topic, okay, we're touching on men's styling basics. It could apply to that guy sitting at home with 3 kids and not knowing how to dress. That could apply to him. And then the next topic, we're talking about the ins and outs of a fashion show and how it's run. That's going to apply to an event planner or a designer that maybe would want to understand how to do a fashion. And then the next topic, we're talking about, sort of lifestyle and about, how to put a business and branding together. That's going to apply to a different totally person. Like, the problem is the messaging is not clear as to who we are, and I think that loses potential viewership or access. So I think what we have to, and as part of this right now, is, okay, let's clearly define what we're doing and then set up a target market plan of, okay, who are we trying to appeal this to, so we know how to target that market. My issue is not with the content, it's how are we twisting the content that we feel that we're talking about to get the right audience.
Like, my issue is a little bit with the content, because part of us, we kind of want people to start getting to know who we are, besides what we put out as our podcast. Like, jokes aside, one, you and I live, like, opposite ends of the world. You and I, we've not had the chance to really kind of just have people get a glimpse into our personal lives, unless it's what we talk about in our podcast a bit. And also, a lot of what we put out is still geared towards us building a TV show. No one's gonna look at it like our page covers events, our page and our page covers our podcast. Our page does not cover. It's very rare that our page is covering who you are, who I am, and how are we in this thing together. Because what you need to realize, Sadr, is that every time I go to an event, right now, this is the assumption. Oh, Rashi +1, that +1 is Sadr, right? Why is that assumption made? Because in this span of time, since we've started working with each other, people have kind of associated you in terms of a host with the fashion world.
Sure, but this is my point
assumption.
Too. But that's again in an immediate circle of some people, and that's who we've been catering towards. We're not catering towards outside of that. Everything we're catering towards, and all the topics we're doing, and all the conversations we're having are very direct catered to the fashion industry. So maybe that's what we're targeting, which is fine. But I think that's that's my point that I'm trying to get. We have to outline that. We're not outlining what our target market is. All the stuff you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with it. I do agree that their personalities have to be shown, all that kind of stuff. But we're not outlining our target market, and that's a challenge, because if our target market is those folks who we're concerned about that know me as a host in that event and know you as a stylist at that event and know that, okay, we're going to be showing up together because this is our team, that's fine. But then if we're putting a event correspondence piece out or a podcast out, who is it that we're targeting? If we're targeting those people in that market, that's fine, but we have to clearly define that so that our content is in line with that, and then our messaging is in line with that. And then, yes, I do agree with you about the personality side, and that's relevant no matter what topic or what direction we choose. But the problem right now, and I'm going to go back to the first thing I said, is we do not have a target market that we've outlined. And if we don't have a target market, we don't know how to push our branding.
So, I mean, I know that our target market started off as men.
Yeah.
However, it has taken a life of its own, not by us. Actually, one of the interesting things is that you and I, we've not tried to, do this. It's just kind of happened where
Yeah, of course.
And
that's not. I'm not complaining about that. Like
no.
The direction is fine. Like if that's what is naturally becoming, that's great. But then we have to make sure we align ourselves with the direction it's taken. And that, it may change a little bit or adjust a little bit, but I think that's we have to align ourselves. Okay, so if we're not targeting the average guy sitting at home and how to do certain things and from a dressing or lifestyle or whatever standpoint, I mean, we're touching into a little bit of that, but we're also touching into that subject from a fashion industry standpoint. We're not touching at it from a personal styling standpoint because, again, the guy sitting at home is, if he Googles a personal styling podcast or a personal styling topic on YouTube, we're not going to pop up, right? So right now, because none of our content is geared at that.
but that's the thing, right? Like, I know we started out as men's stylist, and this goes back to a bit of the way you and I work with each other, and that has played off when we start talking about events, when you're hosting an event, when we have been kind of very open during some of our podcasts, especially in the beginning. The way we interact is what people have wanted, that's the reason that, we've asked to come and cover events. We've asked to give our take on certain things. We have industry guests, and those industry guests, they love being on the show. They love hearing us. They love being part of our conversation and giving their insights. So if you even look at our stats, right, which you were telling me too, like those plays on Spotify, those plays on iTunes, those plays on Google Play, or whatever the case is, they are high numbers because people do enjoy listening to that. The challenge is now, is our focus only men's, and which I disagree with. I do think that in terms of what we're doing and what we're offering, yes, men is a part of it. I do a lot of non-men stuff too, so that is women. But in terms of getting it towards a TV show, closet cleaning, personal styling point, yeah, 100%. Our goal is still to do men, and we've been working on stuff that only targeted towards men, and that's going to be launching, soon with details as we are allowed to put those details out.
Yeah, we'll talk about that at a high level in a second.
But I think in terms from a micro level of what we started Elevated Grapes as and what it is today, it's very different. I do agree with you, and I know that's not the initial vision that you had in mind, but I do believe to get to that big term, long term vision that you have, which is again part of what I do as part of Elevated Grapes, which the background stuff that people don't realize. It's to make that vision come true, right?
So let's agree on one thing. So the target market is not the guy sitting at home right now. That's not what we're doing with any of the content we're putting out, because of the natural progression that it's taken. I think our target market is fashion industry people, regardless of whether they're in Toronto or New York or wherever they are, because I think the events that we're covering, I think the content we're putting out on our podcast is more geared toward them. It's for designers to get their word out in the fashion industry. It's for events that are in the fashion world to be heard and seen by other folks in the fashion world. So I think that our target right now has shifted because of our network, and where we're focusing that target is the fashion industry. So I think that we should make very clear up front. So as we go on with our branding, when it comes to Elevated Grapes, both the podcast and event coverage, and our content that we're putting out, whether it's on YouTube or on our Instagram, it's targeting that specific market. And unless there's something else you feel, because then once we have that outlined, and as we go out and put content, that's what we always have to keep in mind, is that okay, this is our market and this is who we're targeting, and that's how the content has to be positioned. So
then that becomes again something very different, right? Because the word fashion and the word personal stylist, as an example, are two very, very, very different things. Let's just take a very basic example. You have a date that's coming up this weekend that's outside of here at a very, prestigious venue. I am doing my best as a celebrity stylist or a red carpet stylist, to put it out there, to find pieces for you that kind of fit that vibe of what you're doing. That's not to say you cannot style yourself, right? Because we all know, we've all seen all the pieces that you put together. You're pretty amazing at what you do. The difference between you and I is that you can go take a regular, John Doe, do his closet, do his styling, make him look extremely amazing no matter what his size is, what his age is. For me, it comes down to, this is a red carpet. Is this a event? Is this, a photo shoot? I go to the other extreme of things and say, let me try and put something together. So that necessarily, again, that's a very different spectrum from what you're doing. If we pull that into elevated grapes, it's kind of like us saying that, okay, we're not exactly fashion stylists. We are personal stylist. We are wardrobe stylist. It's kind of like that commercial that's going to air very soon that I did the wardrobe styling for, right? That's not a fashion commercial. That's not a fashion stylist job, right? There's no models involved. There's no photo shoot involved. There's no red carpet involved. There's no runway involved. It is something that appeals to the everyday person. So if that's the case, then we have to start, marketing ourselves as more like wardrobe stylist, personal stylist, and then we don't have to cover all events. We don't have to have industry insights, because that is, again, targeted towards, everybody. We have to only then work on men, which I don't think is going to help our growth right away. I think that to say that, hey, we can give you guys this sort of service and this is what we do, we have to also show that we are an expert in our field. Your field being personal styling, my field being, fashion or red carpet or like event styling or like whatever the case is. And in doing that, as we start putting a video series together, that's where your main vision of it being a men's styling show, that kind of comes in together.
Okay, so then you're just not answering my question. So what do you see as the target market today?
I just see personal, or I don't see men as just solely men as our target market.
But what do you see as our target market?
I see men and women who are curious about the fashion industry as our target market.
They're not going to care, because we're doing really specific things, like we're covering an event for someone's shop opening, or we're covering an industry event.
They're okay. So
and then let me finish.
I disagree.
And then so they're like, what relevance does that have to their day-to-day life? Like, they wouldn't, like, I wouldn't, if I wasn't involved in it, I wouldn't care to watch it, right? So like, my point is, I think the work that we're doing, and going back to my earlier point, is catered towards the industry itself, and so, which is fine if that's what we're doing. My issue is not with what we're doing; it's defining that target market. So if we're catering, the stuff we're doing is catering really to the folks that are in that industry, and if that's the case, then I think that our marketing and our branding has to follow suit with that. So we can still be known as stylists. Like, I can still do a style video, you can still do a style video, we can still work on a men's TV show, and that will take a different direction as a product of the line on its own. But I think our branding right now is really, like, if you look at all our content, if you go to our Instagram page or our YouTube page, it's all very catered to the market. The general layman person, even if it's, a guy sitting at home with the kids, or his wife, or his significant other, they're unless they have a specific keen interest in the industry, they're not going to watch our stuff, because it doesn't matter to them.
But this is where I don't see the problem, is because those who want to be part of fashion, those who want to.
I'm not saying there's a problem. What I'm saying is that let's identify our target market, and I think that's our target market.
So our target market is fashion, though. Our target
the industry
market is anyone who is one. Okay, so our target market is people who want to be in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Our target market is people who are within the industry as well. So again, you have enthusiasts, you have people who are already in the industry, and then you have people who are like trying to figure out what the hell they want to do within the industry. Because we're at a phase and we are at an age where it's like there is so many roles right now.
Yep.
That are
just hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to inject a quick message from our sponsor, which is us. And we'll be right back.
Hey guys, we're taking a quick break just to remind you where you can find our podcast online.
You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Tunes.
Apple Music, but you know it, you call it Apple Tunes.
Whatever.
Right. You can also find us on TuneIn, on Google Play, and of course Instagram when we do it the first Tuesday of every month.
And Facebook here and there.
Here and there.
Here and there.
So thanks for tuning in, and now back to our podcast.
All right, so that was good though, because it's a 25-minute conversation, but I think we figured out our target markets. Let's make note of that. So our focus going forward is anybody that's an enthusiast for fashion, anybody in the industry, anybody looking to get into the industry.
I'm going to write this down because I'm old school like that.
Yeah, that's why you have the notepad in front of you, and I don't. I'm just the moron who talks a lot.
Exactly.
Perfect. So as you're making note of that, so guys, this is important because, and these are the discussions that are healthy when you have a partnership, because I think, it's everybody's coming in with a different perspective. Everyone has their take on how they want to see things come along, and it's about understanding that, originally, like we had discussed earlier in this, is that our thought was it's going to be just everything focused on men's styling, which clearly our content, if you watch it, it is not. And it took a direction on its own. And that's not good or bad. It just took a direction because of the type of content, the type of connections, the network that we have, the folks that we're bringing out.
Sorry.
And our interests.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's also...
No, you're not. You're not. Totally not sorry to interrupt. You're never sorry to interrupt.
I am.
No, you're not. Let's be real.
Smile.
Nav, is she ever sorry to interrupt?
What do you mean?
Ha! Is correct. Ta-da! Magic.
Whatever. Anyways.
Actually, you know what you should do?
Let me finish my thought.
I'm going to let you finish your thought in 1 second. But you know what you should do? Every time something interesting or fun happens, you should do that dance that you're doing at Thompson at the end when the show was over and you're hanging around the bar with your friends and having a conversation.
Shh.
Actually, you know what? Nav, cue video.
Okay, so I did not know that was being recorded. Just for the record.
Okay, now everyone just saw it. Back to your thought.
Okay, then I just have a life without being on camera.
No,
what's
you
going
signed
on
up
with
for this.
that? Okay, so no, I signed up to talk about fashion.
Okay, so continue. Talk about fashion.
Wait, what were we talking about?
Fashion. No, I was saying, so as we were talking about earlier, so folks in the industry, folks enthusiasts, folks looking to get into the industry, and then you're gonna interject with something rudely.
I wasn't being rude about it. You clearly
talking to the mic, please. They can't hear you when you don't talk.
I was not being rude about it. You clearly interrupted a million times. So I'm just trying to remember.
Okay,
what
so
we were talking about.
I'll say that again, and then that way you can confirm what you wanted to say. So folks that are looking to get into the industry.
Yes, sorry. Okay, I remembered.
Okay, go ahead.
Here's the thing, though. I do not believe that our direction has changed because of our connections and network. A lot of it has to do with our feedback. So whether you and I like to talk about it, whether we like to admit it or not, part of it has also been just the way you and I are as friends when we, interact with each other, when we talk about stuff that makes us very passionate. Not only do people enjoy our interaction, and I don't know why. Mm-hmm. Apparently,
mm-hmm.
Clearly nobody else has interacted with each other. It seems in this world, but I think that because we are very genuine and we're very passionate, and there's no filter in what we say. I mean, you still try and have a filter. I don't, but I think that is.
Hi, I'm Rashi. I'm gonna swear every chance I get.
Okay, no, that's not me. Calm down. By the way, I did swear in front of a bunch of kids today. I realized at my photo shoot.
Hi, I'm Rashi. I'm gonna swear in front of any chance I get.
That was not what was happening. Please ignore him. And I don't.
My name is Rashi. Watch me swear.
What the hell, man?
Go on.
So I think that's a huge feedback that both you and I have gotten, whether we pay attention to it or not, because our mentality is so, forward and so different when we think of these things. But that has played a huge role in terms of how our target market and how our brand has kind of segmented itself without us really trying. Like, we did one lifestyle topic when, you and I were just like kind of annoyed at each other about some stuff, but that got one of the highest plays you and I've ever seen.
Yeah, it did. It even on our streaming sites, it got one of the highest. The two highest, that was one of them. Actually, three. That was one of them. The one we did with Paul on the men's corporate styling, and then our first one about Met Gala.
Right.
Those are the three highest streamed on all the streaming sites.
So if you were to now, from a outside perspective, right, what does that say? One, when we talk about something that's very current,
yeah,
and we bring men's styling into it, people want to listen.
Yeah.
Also, our interaction, because if you looked at our first podcast when you and I would interact with each other,
which from my perspective was our worst one because we were just not prepared.
Exactly. But because, so the feedback I've gotten until our last 2-3 podcasts, I'll be honest with you, the feedback that I've gotten from people who didn't even know what your and my relationship was, is that we're so honest, candid, and the way you and I interact with each other is what they love to hear, because for them it's like, oh, this is relatable to us. It's not about the romance, it's not about the chemistry even, it's the fact that as a guy or as a girl or as just as a random person listening, I've had people who don't even know who you are but who know me, and I'm sure that's the same case, right? In your role, being like, hey, I can actually relate to this because I do not understand this part of Met Gala. I do not understand how to dress like this. And it's so funny the way these guys talk to each other. I wish I could talk to my best friend like that, or I can talk to my friend like that, right? Yep. So that's what draws people in. So that's where the reason, one of the reasons why Met Gala, that our first podcast was such a hit. You and I, being perfectionists in what we do, we were like, that sucked, right? But again, from a consumer's point of view, from a target market point of view, they loved it.
Which I think also comes across in a lot of our content and our event coverage. Which again, like I don't have a problem with the direction it's taking. I just, like I said, I wanted to be clear on our target market so that we know how to continue to build and grow.
Again, it's understanding our highest place. The one with our lifestyle topic where we touched about my weight loss and my issues in the past, and
sure.
Me respecting the fact that you do have a personal life that I'm not involved in, for example, right? And you're not always involved in my personal life.
Right.
But
we're both involved in Nav's personal life.
We're both in, whether we like it or not, we're actually involved in each other's personal life, whether we want to or not. And Nav's. He just gets Starline messages all the time.
Yeah, and then he waits for a day to respond to them because he wants to make sure we're done with our nonsense.
Yes, exactly.
He's like, okay, they're done. I'm going to give my 2-word response and move on because that's all that's required. He's like, hey, listen, this is it. That's all you need to know. I'm done with you assholes. Bye.
But on a serious note...
And I'm going to go watch football. Bye.
But on a serious note, right? Like, these are things we do have to acknowledge. That podcast was one of our most downloaded
current topics. So yes, I mean, like current topics, fashion advice and lifestyle. So again, those are still there, but again, we have to be careful because the other stuff we're doing doesn't necessarily hit on those three. It's hit, like, for example, the one we did with Paul. Paul's not a designer. He's not a fashion.
But he's a regular guy.
He's a regular guy, and that had a lot of. Again, it's relatable, right? So it's
very relatable.
So that's the key thing. So one of the next topics then in your agenda that we have here was being relatable and building on the relatability. Yes, it's our personalities and our interaction. That's a big part of that. And and one of the notes you made here, which is super important, is showcasing that more. And I think let's jump in. So we know our target market. So we've written that down, right? Just because we don't forget.
Enthusiasts. People who like to follow the fashion industry, and those who want to break into the industry.
Yeah, I think at a general high level, yes, there will always be blips of things that would be a lot more.
And men.
Right, and it could there are blips that where the content is relatable on a more general scale than just that, which is fine. But as long as we know our key target market and what we're focused on, because now it's also about the words we use in our posts, the hashtags we use in our Instagram handle, the target market when we're putting some advertising into where we're going to target that, because we want the maximum exposure for what our branding is, right? So relatability is the next part of that, right?
Now,
so let's talk about relatability for a little bit in terms of ourselves and then the type of content and guests we want to have on.
So then let's actually clarify the biggest question that people have about us is that why do people relate to us so much? And I think that one of the reasons is that coming out on the podcast is that you and I are just really, really good friends with each other.
Absolutely.
And people kind of do not seem to understand that.
Well, that's not my problem.
It's not my problem either, and
No, it's not your problem. It's not our problem.
It's not our problem, but again, to put it out there, like, yes, you and I, we are two good friends who decided to talk about fashion because that's what we both love.
Mm-hmm. In the middle of that, you dropped your pen.
Yes, I realized that. Let me focus.
Sorry.
I have to go home soon after. I don't know how I'm going to get home after this. That's my stress right now.
I got to edit podcasts before tomorrow because we got to put one out tomorrow. We're recording this on a Monday night and our podcasts are out on a Tuesday.
We are recording on
Not only do we have to edit
Canadian Thanksgiving.
Nav's got to get it. He's got to edit out. I got to get it back. I got to edit trailers. We got a lot of work in the next 24 hours.
I know. And it's like almost 11:30 and my mom's
we all have
calling
jobs.
me nonstop. Yeah.
Continue. Go
on. Okay. So so that's one factor of the whole, being relatable because, and I'm sure you've gotten that feedback from like your side of the pond. Mine has always, had people being like asking me about you. But at the same sentence, it never was just like, oh, are you guys dating or whatever? It's like, oh, but he's so cool. It's so funny how you guys talk. You guys talk like best friends about everything. No. And it's like, can I be on your podcast?
Well, I think we both thought about this from the same perspective. We both were like, we just want to be who we are. We don't want to fake it. We don't want to act like we're someone we're not. We don't want to put on a character or a persona. I'm going to talk how I talk.
Which is why you made so much fun of me.
100%. That's what I do off camera or on camera. Whether the camera's on or not, it's going to happen. So that's just normal. That's also my personality. But hey, it's just, I think that was an understanding and we kept true to that, which I think makes us relatable. And I think what we've learned from our guests so far is the ones that have done well are the ones where it's relatable. So I think relatability is a key factor for us to focus on when we think about guests, when we think about topics we're going to discuss without guests, even when it comes to our event coverage. Even if let's just say we choose to cover a really sort of exclusive industry fashion event that most people wouldn't have access to or wouldn't necessarily care to be at, or it's not their forte. How can we take that event and take our coverage of it and make it relatable to someone who's like, hey, this is kind of cool, even though it's not something I would ever know about or whatever be in that world. I think that's what we have to always think about. So I think relatability is always at top of mind. So I think what we have to do is when we're looking at an event, okay, cool, let's cover this event that we've been asked to do, and we want to be a part of it. It makes sense for us because it is a cool event for us to be involved with. But how do we take our messaging back? And when we do our chats at the event, when we do not just like obviously the shots that Nav's going to take care of, but just the chats that we have before, after, and during the events on camera, I think we have to be very cognizant, being natural and being ourselves, but what we're going to say in them. So in terms of direction, not scripting, obviously, but nothing we do is scripted, and we want to keep it that way.
Right. So one of the things I've noticed is that one of the events that we covered earlier this year was the Prism Awards. Right? Yeah. That was one of our most viewed ones. Okay. On YouTube, and I think that was because.
And that was really, really shitty recording. Like we had mic issues that day. So like the recording was bad that day.
We had mic issues, but I think what people loved about that is that they saw two people for an event where they're figuring out what the event really is.
We had no idea what was happening.
our recording was shitty and we were very open about it, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's the factor. That's the realness factor. One of our other most viewed ones was Cassandra's store opening, because we showed our personalities where we loved the pants, that we did a pant dance, and I literally reacted to you, grinding your hips in a way that I would react, whether it's off camera, and be like,
Air poke.
what is going on here? And
Hashtag air poke.
and like poking your belly.
So I think, and one of the things I think we're going to have to be okay with is that there's going to be events that are going to be put on, and, correspondence we're going to do where it's people that we know and it's people that we have a relationship with. But I think even in those environments, one thing we have to be clear to those folks with coming in is that, hey, we're going to be real. So if we don't like something, or if we feel a certain way about something, in terms of our coverage, we're going to be very candid and open about it in a respectful manner, because obviously we're not there to put someone down, but it's also that's what our branding is, that we're real. And I think that's goes back to relatability. So I think it's a very important point when we're doing an event piece, is we got to be as real as possible. We're not out there to send a message that we don't feel comfortable with. If I feel a certain way about something, or you feel a certain way about something, you should, in that environment, be comfortable enough to say it in the most respectful manner, because you're not putting someone down. But just, again, to keep real to our message, is that we want to be relatable and be ourselves, and we don't want to put on a script, or we don't want to put on a character or a show just because we're on camera.
And that's it, right? So I think one of the reasons why there's certain, so this goes back to us understanding our views that we get on YouTube. Our highest views have always been our event coverage. It's also been, for example, our behind the scenes, when we start talking about our challenges of doing what we're doing, because that becomes the relatable factor. Our podcast on YouTube is not as high,
Sure.
but our Spotify numbers
Are higher, yeah.
are a lot
Of course,
higher,
of
because
course.
people don't want to watch the two of us talking to each other. They don't mind hearing us. And again, when you
But for an hour, if we're just sitting and having a conversation, unless it's something that they have interest in, they're not going to listen.
No, but it's not only that. Even when you and I, right? Like we share so many podcasts that we hear. We share to each other. If you've noticed, one of the things when we hear those podcasts is that either like it's the time that we're like winding down or something, or we're just like figuring, or we're just like in our zone. When we're in there, we don't want to be on YouTube and watch two people talking. We want to hear this conversation, because when you're hearing it, your imagination.
And you can do it in any environment. You could be in your car. You could be.
Well, it's not only
You're working out. You can be anywhere, right?
Right.
I know people that literally listen to talking podcasts while they're working out. So.
But yes, and you're absolutely right on that. But also is that your imagination, your emotions start relating to certain like situations, correct? So for example, Jay Shetty. That's a podcast that you and I both love listening to on our own time. There are so many different types of there's so many different podcasts of his that you hear at your own time, I hear at my own time. And when we discuss it, we're like, oh my God, this is what we both got out of it, right? And sometimes it's such different perspectives, but that's because what he's saying emotes to you in a very different way, and vice versa. So same thing when people hear us on Spotify or iTunes or any of the other, podcast streaming channels, it's what we think and what we say they can relate to. Now on YouTube, when people start seeing the way we cover events, they kind of love that, because you don't get a guy and a girl who's just like, yo, this is what we feel. Let's make fun of each other because that's what we naturally do, but also give our insights in a very, very, very respectful manner.
So and I think you're right. So I think let's close that topic on being true to the fact that everything that we put out, the messaging is that we're going to be ourselves in every situation,
right? So
that it's relatable, because I think that's one of our key factors is being real, right? And we don't want to change that under any situation. So So being real and relatable is super important. I think whether it's an event coverage, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a TV show, whatever we're doing, we got to be real to that relatability factor and being who we are and sticking to that.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So that's. I think we're both on the same page on that topic. Yes, correct.
Right.
Okay. So metrics and all that kind of stuff. That's stuff we can do offline. We can check that. And we sort of touched on the metrics in some of our more popular podcasts. Actually, you're not making notes.
Well, that's because I'm kind of confused with our discussion.
Well, why don't you say that?
We're just basically saying what you and I know. What's our next steps?
Well, this is part of our next steps. Is we've identified a target market, which was a huge issue for us.
Which is what I wrote down here. This
Yes.
is our target market.
Yeah. But some of the other stuff that we've mentioned on our action plan here is like social media presence, podcast streaming, and metrics. Guests, like who our guests are going to be. But all that falls now in line with the fact that we do have a bit more of a targeted branding direction, right? So now.
Yeah, but then our guests become people who kind of cater to our target market. So we get, for example, high level, city event planners or like fashion event planners that does target to people who want to be, who are either
That's what I mean.
enthusiasts.
So now, but now we can choose. Now we can choose our guests and our topics based on the fact that our target market is identified, right? But you're saying that you don't understand.
Sure.
You're saying that like it's not clear to you.
No.
Talk into the mic.
Our target market is clear. It's just not changed the next few steps. Like our next few steps is happening or it's there regardless of the strategy session. Like the
the next few steps would be a lot more confusing if we don't know the target market. But now we have identified
I think
that.
our branding was a lot more confusing. Like our messaging to people was a lot more confusing, more than our target market, because like I've said before, yes, I understand that the bigger picture is the men's styling stuff. I do think you and I both know the current project that we're working on, which we will not give any details because we can't at the moment until certain things are signed and dotted and all that fun stuff. That is focused solely on men's fashion, which is the reason Elevated Rape started. But prior to that, everything else, it's taking a life of its own, which I have no issue with. I think that's really the right way to go about it, because you cannot say that I'm an expert in A without having a backing of BCD, right? And right now what we're doing is proving our backing on BCD, which is the other stuff, which is our events, which is our industry guests, which is our styling tips that we put out in our podcast.
I don't understand the relevance of what you're saying right now.
I'm just saying that, like, I personally don't understand really what this session was, because our target market hasn't changed. It's still
No, but our target market wasn't defined because our target market at the onset was
so we took
men,
an
but it's
hour
not.
to define our target
Yeah.
market. I definitely that in like 5 minutes, bro.
Dude, we in 25 minutes, as we said, that we defined our target market, and then you're telling me you're confused about the conversation. Like that's what the purpose of it was.
No, I said I'm confused about our next steps because our next steps have not changed from our conversation now and what was originally planned.
No, because our next steps will now be in line with the fact that we have a target market. So if we don't have a target market, how can we discuss next steps? We were both on different pages where the target market was concerned. Because as we discussed, originally this was supposed to be a men's styling focus, and it wasn't. And so and the issue is not that that's changed. It's fine that it's changed, but our branding, messaging, all that kind of stuff was not in line with that.
But our next set of guests, regardless of this conversation, was going to be there.
No, because if our target market was okay, we decide that we still want to keep on men's styling, then our next set of guests would not be the same. So our next set of guests would be defined based on what our target market is. It's like simple business 101. Like you have your target market, we focus on guests. If we're saying that we're doing men's styling, then our guests are only people who are going to be teaching you how to dress in certain
don't
ways.
forget, our target market was also a discussion of a target market for a podcast versus a target market for our, anything that to do with a video series.
Sure, the event, and we're talking about the content that's out right now. Our content that's out right now did
So
not fall
our
online.
content for our podcast itself, which is the content that's out right now, or our event coverage. If we're covering events, we're not covering events that are only catered to men, right? Like we're not doing that.
I know, but now we're going in circles because we did conclude that's fine because we are covering. We're not doing anything to focus on men's styling in any of our stuff. With a couple of maybe podcasts that we did a little bit of that, but outside of that, we're doing nothing. It's all what we defined out there. The enthusiast.
Yeah, it's like fashion enthusiast, fashion.
So we're going in circles. We just defined that, and now our next steps in terms of the type of guest, we define the relatability is one of our key hooks. So we know that that's our focus. So now when we talk about our guests, we talk about the events. Like we just said, we're going to talk, when we look at an event, how are we going to make that relatable? Even though it's an event that is really focused in the fashion industry. How do we make it relatable to the person who's maybe an enthusiast or someone who wants to watch to understand from a personality standpoint? How do we focus our guests that are focused on this part of the industry? Because maybe now getting someone to come in and talk about, how to wear a cufflink is not a primary topic for us anymore. Whereas in the past, we would have looked for that. So defining this is the baseline of defining our next steps and our guests and all the other stuff, like our relatability and personality. Like who we are as people, that's not going to change. We want to be relatable regardless of whatever direction in the market we go to. But defining our content and defining our guests and defining what sort of words we're going to use in our messaging, what kind of hashtags we're going to use, is all super important from the basis of that target market. Without that, we can't discuss the next step. And we weren't clear on that. We'd never done a follow-up discussion to say that, hey, this is where our target market is now. It's changed. So how do we define it? Because before it was, our target market was the male between 20 and 40. That's not our target market today. And none of our content caters to that. So now that we've defined that, the next steps are going to be able to fall in line with that. Whereas if our target market was the male between 20 to 40, then half our guests that we would want to consider to do going forward, we'd cancel them because they don't make sense. But in this scenario, now that we've defined the target market, I'm not going to go out and talk to a designer to come on the show and tell me how to tie a tie, because that's not our target market. We are going to talk to the designer about maybe a designer that wants to talk about the industry and talk about their involvement in the industry and talk about their challenges and come up in the industry. That's more focused. But I wouldn't bring him on to talk about how to tie a tie, because that's not relevant anymore, because we know our target market. That's why this is important.
Kind of zoned out. I'm not gonna lie.
Good talk. So we got 2 minutes. So I think this is a good spot to end this, just because otherwise we'll be here for another 2 hours talking about in circles. So again, like, some of these conversations, they're super important within a business, within a partnership, and within a partnership, it's important to have them because people could be on a different page. Their understanding of the situation or the topics could be different, and yes, they're a little bit frustrating at times. But if you're working with someone, that respect has to be there to have those conversations so you can hear each other out and build on the next steps for yourselves. Yeah, maybe we spent an hour talking about figuring out a target market, but maybe to Rashi that was already assumed, and maybe to me it wasn't, because that's what I'm hearing. And but the thing is, unless we have that discussion, we don't know. And then unless we have that discussion, we're both on separate pages as to what next steps would be. So yeah, and sometimes it feels like you're kind of spinning wheels, but that's part of building something together with someone and understanding both people's perspectives. And I think that's why we have these discussions, because we're here to listen to each other. And Rashi's here to say, okay, well, I'm confused because I thought, I understood it to be this way anyways, and that doesn't change anything for me, whereas I'm saying something totally different. So, but unless we have that discussion, we're going to go about it from a different perspective, and that's why this is important.
And I think that's one of the key takeaway in terms of like working with somebody else, right? Like
absolutely,
with partnerships is, like I said, I assumed that we're pretty much on the same page. Clearly, we weren't, and that's fine too, because now we just know the next direction to go.
That's it. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this one up. Nav, thanks for doing the dance on the corner of my eye. I appreciate that. So thank you again for tuning in. Google us, look us up everywhere. It's at Elevated Grapes on Google, and we will see you next week. Rashi's yawning. Good night.
Good night.
Hey guys, thank you for watching that podcast or that video. If you like what you hear and you want to hear more of us and see some of our behind the scenes stuff, subscribe below.
Yes, hit that little red, button thingy that's over there and hit subscribe and keep following us for a lot more cool, fun stuff.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you soon.